The first Veylan scout probe sent to measure Earth's defenses returned without its engine, without its weapons, and with a human child's voice singing through every channel. No one aboard the Dominion flagship understood the words at first. The melody was soft, almost broken, a thin little sound drifting across the command deck of the Conquest of Dawn while officers stood frozen at their stations. The probe should have transmitted orbital maps, military inventories, industrial output, and population estimates. Instead, it repeated the same song again and again, then projected a single line of translated text onto the main display. We found your machine. We fixed what was broken. We removed what was cruel. Come carefully. Admiral Ravax then stared at the message for a long time. The probe had crossed into the human system 3 days earlier. It had been cloaked beneath 8 layers of Veylan shadow field technology. Its hull could survive a direct strike from primitive atomic weapons. Its encryption had not been broken in 1,200 years. It had been designed to observe developing worlds without being seen, touched, or understood, and yet the humans had captured it, opened it, repaired its damaged gyroscope, removed its weapons package, and sent it home singing. Ravax did not like mysteries. He especially did not like mysteries from species that still burned chemical fuel to escape gravity. Replay the final transmission from the surface, he ordered. His communications officer lowered her crest and obeyed. The human response appeared again, translated from the planetary broadcast they had intercepted 6 hours earlier. To the unidentified civilization operating unauthorized surveillance equipment inside the Sol system, your device entered restricted space, carried armaments, and attempted to map civilian population centers. We have returned it in a non-hostile configuration. We request immediate diplomatic contact. We also request that your next object not aim weapons at our children. Several Veylan officers made clicking sounds of amusement. Ravax did not. He had commanded campaigns against 6 outer barrier species. He had burned pirate moons, shattered rebellion fleets, and watched the glass storms roll over worlds that refused Dominion order. He knew the rhythm of conquest. First came discovery, then intimidation, then submission. If submission failed, destruction. Primitive species usually begged. The more arrogant ones threatened. The interesting ones lied. But these humans had scolded the Dominion like a careless neighbor who had thrown a stone through a window. Send the formal notice, Ravax said. No one laughed after that. The message reached Earth 8 minutes later. It appeared on military screens, civilian radios, emergency satellites, fishing boats, weather stations, hacked billboard networks, and one children's cartoon channel in the middle of an episode about a blue rabbit learning to share. People across Earth heard the same cold voice translated into every major language. Species of the third planet, you have interfered with Dominion property. Your system lies within the expansion route of the Veylan Dominion. Your star, mineral bodies, water reserves, and biological labor capacity have been assessed as valuable. You will open your orbital space, surrender all military command structures, and accept Dominion governance. Refusal will result in corrective invasion. You have 40 planetary days to comply. For 4 hours, Earth went silent in the way only a world can go silent. Air traffic stalled. Stock markets collapsed. Border arguments vanished mid-sentence. Religious leaders opened their doors. Governments sealed their bunkers. Parents drove to schools without knowing why, except that their hands would not stop shaking until they had seen their children. Then the emergency assembly met beneath the old mountain complex in Norway, in a chamber built for wars that had never come and doomsday scenarios that had always sounded too dramatic until that morning. The first 12 speakers wanted surrender. The next 7 wanted negotiation. 3 wanted to launch everything humanity had at the alien fleet, even though the alien fleet was still beyond Neptune, and humanity did not have weapons that could reach it. A general from Brazil said the word impossible. A minister from India said the word survival. An engineer from Lagos, who had been invited only because she had designed half the world's disaster grid systems, stood up after 11 hours of argument and asked the question that changed the war. What are we trying to save? Nobody answered at first. She asked again, louder, "What are we trying to save? Territory? Pride? Governments? Military bases? Flags? Because if we are trying to save those, we will lose. If we are trying to save humanity, then we stop thinking like nations under attack and start thinking like a species inside a burning building." The room went quiet. Her name was Amara Okonkwo. She had never commanded soldiers. She had never fired a weapon outside mandatory service training. But she had pulled earthquake survivors out of collapsed towers, rebuilt coastal cities after superstorms, and designed evacuation systems for places where roads vanished under floodwater. She knew something most generals forgot. Victory was not always standing where you started. Sometimes victory was getting everyone out before the roof came down. Earth's reply to the Dominion was sent 2 hours later. The planet Earth rejects foreign rule. We request 40 days to evacuate vulnerable civilian populations from likely strike zones and establish basic channels for continued communication. During this period, we will not attack first. If you attack civilians, negotiations end forever. Admiral Ravax read the reply and felt the first flicker of irritation. "They ask for time to hide," his tactical minister said. "No," Ravax said. "They ask for time to make us watch them hide. Should we grant it?" Ravax studied the rotating image of Earth. Blue oceans, white storms, fragile lights scattered across the dark side like jewelry laid over a throat. The species had no unified fleet worth naming. Their orbital defenses were laughable. Their colonies were mining outposts and research stations. Their moon settlements could be cracked with a single controlled kinetic strike. 40 days would change nothing. "Grant it," Ravax said, "and send watchers. I want every movement recorded. I want to know what a species does when it believes it is preparing for extinction." The watchers went. They expected missile factories. They expected conscription centers. They expected politicians giving speeches, soldiers marching, laboratories rushing to build weapons too late. What they found instead confused them so deeply that the first intelligence summary was returned to the flagship with an error warning attached. The humans were moving libraries, not just books, though they were moving those too. They were copying archives, museums, family records, school lessons, medical databases, engineering manuals, recipes, folk songs, court transcripts, extinct animal genomes, children's drawings, and personal messages from the dying to the unborn. They were storing them in hardened vaults beneath mountains, inside lunar lava tubes, aboard converted cargo ships, in sealed data seeds scattered across asteroids, and in thousands of small black boxes launched into deep space on silent trajectories. They called it the memory rain. Ravax watched footage of human children lining up outside a local archive building, each holding one object to be scanned: a toy, a photograph, a broken medal, a handwritten letter. One girl placed a cracked ceramic bowl on the table and told the technician it had belonged to her grandmother, who made soup when people were sad. The technician scanned it with the seriousness of a priest handling a relic. "What military value does this have?" asked the tactical minister. "None," said the intelligence officer. "Then why preserve it?" The officer hesitated. "They appear to believe memory is a form of continuity." Ravax dismissed the report as sentimental panic. The next report was worse. The humans were not emptying prisons. They were emptying hospitals, not by abandoning the sick, but by moving them first. Every intensive care patient, every child on assisted breathing, every elder dependent on machines, every pregnant woman near term, every person whose survival required constant care was being transferred into underground medical shelters or orbital refuge habitats. Doctors, nurses, paramedics, hospice workers, and biomedical technicians were being given authority equal to regional military commanders. A battlefield commander on Earth protested during one intercepted meeting. He said heavy lift aircraft were needed to move armor and artillery. The doctor across from him answered, "Then your tanks can wait for the babies." The tanks waited. Ravax watched the footage without expression. Then came the strangest report of all. Earth was mobilizing firefighters, not as soldiers, not officially. They were being placed in charge of urban survival zones, tunnel mapping, emergency air routing, pressure door installation, collapse rescue, smoke management, and evacuation discipline. Alongside them were miners, submarine crews, polar researchers, disaster relief volunteers, deep-sea welders, cave divers, oil rig engineers, trauma surgeons, rail dispatchers, power grid operators, farmers, radio amateurs, and people who maintained sewer systems in cities older than several Veylan dynasties. The Dominion had expected generals. Humanity had appointed everyone who knew how to keep something alive when systems failed. "What is this organization?" Ravax asked. His intelligence officer checked the translation. "They call it the Lantern Corps." "Military?" "No." "Civilian?" "Not exactly." "What does it do?" The officer looked uncomfortable. "Everything that remains necessary after everything else breaks." Ravax disliked that answer. Across Earth, the Lantern Corps grew faster than any army. Its symbol appeared painted on shelter doors, radio towers, trains, hospitals, cargo containers, and the sides of battered civilian spacecraft. A small white flame inside a black circle. Not a flame of conquest, a flame carried through darkness. Human military preparations existed, of course. Missiles were moved. Rail launchers were buried, orbital mirrors were hardened, warships were assembled from anything with a reactor and a hull. But the Watchers noticed the weapons were never the center of human activity. The center was always movement. People moving from cities to tunnels, food moving from coastlines to mountains, seeds moving from farms to cold vaults, machine shops moving underground, children moving under assumed routes that changed every 6 minutes. Satellites moved into strange, wasteful orbits. Old ships moved outward with no weapons at all. Empty trains ran into visible shelters, while full trains ran beneath them. Humanity became a planet of doors, and behind every door was another door, and behind that door was a question the Dominion could not answer quickly enough. Where had they gone? Ravax summoned his command staff on the 23rd day. The main display showed Earth's evacuation patterns as golden streams. There were too many. They flowed, split, looped, vanished, reappeared, reversed, and sometimes moved cargo that turned out to be nothing but sandbags and old furniture. "They are inefficient," said the logistics minister. "No," said the intelligence officer quietly. "They are redundant." Ravax turned toward her. She bowed her head. "They do not trust any single route, any single command, any single shelter, any single network, any single plan. Every system has a backup. Every backup has human operators trained to improvise if communication fails. They are preparing for decapitation strikes by making decapitation meaningless." The tactical minister clicked his mandibles. "Then we strike everything." "We cannot strike everything at once," the intelligence officer said. "Not without sterilizing the planet." "That remains an option." Ravax kept his gaze on the golden streams. Sterilization was not conquest. The Dominion needed Earth alive, needed labor, water, industry, biosphere conversion potential. The High Crown had been clear: subdue, occupy, extract, not annihilate. "Continue observation," Ravax said. "When the 40 days end, we begin with orbital dominance, disable command, destroy fleet assets, land pacification forces at their primary government centers. Once their leadership falls, their redundancy will become confusion." No one argued. No one yet understood that humanity had already assumed its leadership would fall. On the 40th day, the Dominion fleet entered the inner system. 312 warships crossed the orbit of Mars in perfect layered formation. Their hulls were long and pale, grown from memory metal in the shipyards of Vela Prime. Their weapons could boil oceans from orbit if ordered. Their shields had broken fleets older than human civilization. Their crews had been trained since adolescence to move, fire, breathe, and die as components of a single machine. Ahead of them, between Earth and the Moon, waited the human fleet. Ravak stared. It was not a fleet. It was a scrapyard that had learned defiance. Cargo haulers, mining barges, lunar ferries, fuel tankers, research craft, old military cruisers pulled from museums, passenger liners stripped to frames and covered in ugly armor plating, tugs with engines too large for their spines, automated factories with thrusters welded to their sides, thousands of objects, many too small to be warships, many too slow to survive, all drifting in loose clouds around Earth like debris after an accident. But on every hull burned the same white flame, the Lantern Corps. "They have placed civilians in the battle line," the tactical minister said, offended. "No," the sensor officer answered. "Most are unmanned or minimally crewed. Some are remotely piloted. Some are running on preloaded instructions. Some appear to be broadcasting thousands of civilian control signals at once." "Jamming?" "Not exactly. They are voting." Ravax turned. "Explain." The officer struggled. "Their ships are receiving tactical suggestions from ground networks. Millions of human participants are submitting maneuvers, targeting priorities, repairs, decoys, and warnings. Machine systems filter the suggestions, but humans approve adjustments constantly." The tactical minister clicked in disgust. "A mob cannot command a fleet." The first human transmission arrived before Ravax could respond. A woman's voice, calm and tired. "Dominion Fleet, this is Admiral Leona Reyes of the Earth Continuity Defense. You are approaching protected civilian space. Turn back, open negotiations, or be resisted." Ravax opened a channel. His image appeared before her, translated through the diplomatic lattice. Reyes was older than he expected. Human hair silver at the temples, face lined, eyes steady. Behind her, the command deck looked cramped, improvised, full of mismatched screens and cables. Someone had taped a child's drawing above the main navigation display. "You cannot resist," Ravax said. Reyes looked at him for one heartbeat. "Everyone says that before they learn what the word means." The channel closed. Ravax felt the command deck waiting for him. "Disable them," he said. "Minimum planetary collateral. Begin." The first volley from the Dominion fleet was precise enough to carve names into moons. White lances crossed the void. Human ships vanished in blossoms of torn metal and escaping air. Shieldless barges split apart. Tankers vented fuel in glittering clouds. Old frigates died before their targeting systems finished locking. In the first 8 minutes, Ravax destroyed 406 human vessels. The human fleet did not retreat. It unfolded. Every destroyed ship released something, not missiles, not mines, something smaller. Canisters no larger than coffins tumbled from the wreckage, opened, and scattered clouds of reflective dust. The dust spread under tiny bursts of cold gas, forming veils between the fleets. Dominion sensors adjusted automatically, then adjusted again, then began lying. Ranges stretched, velocities doubled, thermal blooms appeared where nothing existed. Human ships seemed to split into dozens of ghosts, then vanish, then reappear inside weapon arcs that should have been empty. "Sensor contamination," the officer snapped. "Unknown material interference. Clear it." Trying, human railguns fired through the dust. Primitive slugs, dense metal, unguided, laughable by Dominion standards. Except they were not aimed at ships. They were aimed at the places Dominion ships would move after trusting corrupted sensors. The destroyer Veyrath's spear turned 3 degrees to avoid a phantom heat signature and placed itself directly into the path of 6 tungsten rods moving at impossible speed. Its shield caught 4, The fifth shattered against armor. The sixth punched through a maneuvering vane and sent the vessel spinning out of formation. The human fleet cheered on open channels, not with laughter, with names. Cape Town Battery confirms hit. Lunar Foundry says keep them turning. Grandma Annick's math circle predicted that drift. Tell Annick she owes us cookies. Ravax listened to the chatter in disbelief. They were not disciplined. They were not chaotic either. They were collaborative. Every ship, station, bunker, school basement, and volunteer simulation room was feeding the battle. Retired physicists calculated debris paths. Teenagers flagged sensor ghosts. Fishermen used storm tracking instincts to predict dust flow. Gamers coordinated drone swarms. Blind operators listened to signal distortion and identified stealth movements by rhythm. Humanity had not built a better command system. It had become one. Break their communications, Ravax ordered. The Dominion fleet released a cascade of wide-spectrum jammers. For 3 seconds, human channels dissolved into static. Then the static began pulsing. The humans had expected the jamming. They used it as a carrier wave. Short bursts, light flashes, laser relays, neutrino pings from deep bunkers, Morse code from museum transmitters, signal flags on orbital platforms. Tight beam bursts bounced off clouds of metallic dust. Old satellites woke from forgotten orbits and began repeating messages in protocols older than some human nations. The human fleet stuttered, stumbled, then kept moving. Ravax leaned forward. Target their command ship. Which one? The question hung in the command deck. On the main display, command signatures appeared and disappeared across hundreds of vessels. Every time the Dominion identified a likely command node, it handed control to another. Some were real, some were decoys, some were ships already dead, repeating old orders to lure fire. Find Admiral Reyes. They found her ship 11 minutes later. The Dominion lances cut it in half. For 1 second, the human fleet's chatter went silent. Ravax exhaled. Then a new voice came through, shaking but clear. This is Deputy Coordinator Hadi. Admiral Reyes is gone. Continue Lantern Pattern 12. We knew this might happen. Another ship took command. Then another after it died. Then a bunker in the Andes. Then a submarine under Arctic ice. Then a lunar farm dome. Then a woman in a wheelchair in a shelter beneath Manila who had spent 30 years coordinating typhoon evacuations and now directed 6,000 drones through a gap in Dominion point defense. The battle lasted 9 hours. By every Dominion measure, it was a victory. Earth's orbital fleet was shattered. Thousands of human craft were destroyed. The debris field around the planet became a ring of fire. Major defense platforms burned. The moon's visible batteries were silenced. Dominion losses were minor by comparison. 11 ships crippled, 3 destroyed, 26 damaged. But the conquest of Dawn's command deck did not feel victorious, because Earth was still transmitting. Because the human evacuation had continued through the entire battle. Because while the Dominion fleet had been focused upward, millions of civilians had moved downward, outward, sideways, into places that now no longer appeared on any Dominion map. And because every destroyed human ship had released more dust, more decoys, more sensor ghosts, more tiny machines clinging to Dominion hulls like frost, Ravax ordered a landing. The first pacification forces descended over the North American Continental Command Zone. Their target was a military headquarters buried beneath a mountain range. Dominion intelligence had identified it as one of Earth's emergency leadership centers. The landing ships came down in armored triangles, their shields glowing blue through the smoke. No missiles rose to meet them. No aircraft attacked. No artillery fired. The site appeared abandoned. Ground Marshal Sithra reported from the surface. Primary entrance breached. No defenders encountered. Proceed, Ravax said. The Dominion soldiers entered in perfect formation, their armor sealed against toxins, heat, radiation, and vacuum. Their rifles tracked every corridor. Their drones moved ahead, mapping chambers, doors, and ventilation shafts. They found offices, they found maps, they found emergency rations, they found conference rooms still warm, they found a wall covered in photographs of human families, each marked with evacuation status. Then they found the message painted across the deepest blast door: "You are in the wrong mountain." Sithra had 2 seconds to read it before the entire complex filled with foam. Not fire, not poison, foam. It erupted from vents, floor grates, ceiling seams, and false panels, dense, expanding, adhesive, electrically active foam that hardened around armor joints, rifle barrels, drone rotors, sensor sockets, and communication nodes. Soldiers tried to cut through it. The foam flexed. They tried to burn it. It released signal chaff and static bursts. They tried to retreat. Doors sealed behind them. Then the lights went out. The humans spoke through the walls. "Dominion personnel, you are not being killed. You are being delayed. Your oxygen reserves will last 8 hours. Medical aid will be available after surrender. Please do not damage the red-marked pipes. They are part of the ventilation system keeping you alive." Ground Marshal Sithra roared and ordered his soldiers forward. They made it 12 meters in 3 hours. By the time Dominion engineers cut them out, 2 million civilians had evacuated through a tunnel network beneath the real command zone 40 kilometers away. The same pattern repeated across Earth. Landing forces captured empty government buildings, seized decoy airports, stormed fake communication centers staffed by mannequins with heat packs, spent hours clearing shelters that turned out to be bait, while real shelters shifted populations through mining tunnels, subway expansions, sewer arteries, and ancient catacombs scanned into emergency maps by hobby historians years earlier. The humans fought, but not where expected. A Dominion squad pursuing a convoy found the road ahead collapsed, not by explosives, but by a controlled landslide triggered after the last human vehicle crossed. The pursuing soldiers were trapped until elderly farmers emerged from hidden culverts and offered them water if they put down their weapons. A coastal landing force advanced on a port city and discovered every fuel tank empty, every crane disabled, every ship sunk in the harbor at angles that made landing impossible. The city's loudspeakers played evacuation instructions in 3 languages and one message in Valon: "You are late." A Dominion armored column crossed a desert and lost all navigation when human mirror arrays on surrounding cliffs flooded their sensors with sunlight. The column stopped for recalibration and found itself surrounded by children's kites carrying relay transmitters. Every delay was small, every embarrassment survivable, every victory incomplete. After 2 weeks, the Dominion controlled every major target on its original invasion plan, and almost none of the people those targets were supposed to control. Ravax requested updated population compliance numbers. The intelligence officer did not want to give them. "Speak," Ravax said. "Confirmed civilian capture rate is below 7%. 7? Yes, Admiral. We occupy their cities. Many of their cities, yes. Then where are the people?" The officer brought up a planetary map. It pulsed with uncertainty. "Everywhere else." Ravax dismissed the staff and stood alone before Earth's image. The planet was bruised. Orbital fires burned in thin lines. Smoke crawled across continents. Cities sat dark under blackout protocols. The Dominion flag flew over empty capitals. Yet beneath the surface, humanity kept moving. Worse, humanity kept repairing. Power grids thought destroyed returned in fragments. Not entire networks, but enough to run hospitals, enough to pump water, enough to open tunnel doors. Local workshops fabricated replacement parts from scavenged vehicles. Children carried batteries in backpacks between shelters. Amateur radio operators maintained continents-wide communication chains from basements and barns. The Dominion could break machines. The humans kept becoming the missing parts. On the 18th day of occupation, Ravax received a prisoner, The human had been found inside a collapsed orbital elevator station near the equator. He was old, badly injured, and had refused evacuation because someone had needed to stay behind and manually open the final pressure locks for the last departing medical train. His name was Tomas Ilyin. He had been a civil engineer, not a soldier. The interrogation room aboard the Conquest of Dawn was sterile and bright. Tomas sat across from Ravax with one arm in a Dominion medical brace and half his face covered in healing gel. He looked exhausted enough to die, but his eyes remained irritatingly attentive. "You commanded the elevator station defenses?" Ravax asked. "No," Tomas said. "I maintained municipal bridges for 42 years. You delayed an armored landing battalion for 6 hours." Tomas shrugged and winced. "Bridges and armies both hate load limits." Ravax studied him. "Why stay behind?" "Door had to be opened from the station side after the power failed. You could have escaped before that. Then the children on the train would not have." The answer was immediate. No drama, no pride, a simple equation. Ravax felt something cold move through his thoughts. "You understand we will win," he said. Tomas looked around the interrogation room. "Define win." "We will control your planet. You already control a lot of empty rooms. We will find your shelters. Some. We will break your resistance." "Maybe." "You doubt it?" Tomas leaned back. "Admiral, my city flooded when I was 26. Water took the power, the roads, the phones, the hospitals. For 9 days, people shared food from rooftops and tied ropes between buildings so strangers would not get swept away. My wife died in that flood. My son was born in a school gym 2 days later because the maternity ward was underwater. I learned something then." "What?" "Humans do not need much to continue. A candle, a voice, a hand on a rope. You can take the cities. You can take the sky. You can make us cold, hungry, frightened, and buried. But as long as one person reaches for another in the dark, you have not conquered us." Ravax said nothing. Tomas continued, softer. "You came here thinking war was about making us kneel. We have spent our whole history learning how to stand up again." The words spread. Ravax did not authorize the recording's release, but human systems had already infiltrated the interrogation feed through the medical brace they had allowed Dominion doctors to place on Tomas's arm. Within hours, every shelter on Earth had heard him. A candle, a voice, a hand on a rope. The phrase appeared painted in tunnels, scratched onto helmets, whispered over radio channels when bombardments began. Dominion troops heard it too. At first they mocked it, then they began to hate it, because every time they believed a region pacified, a candle appeared in a window of an empty street, and somewhere nearby, a convoy vanished. Every time they destroyed a radio tower, a voice came through sewer pipes, emergency sirens, or children's toys modified into repeaters. Every time they sealed a tunnel, they found handprints in wet concrete beside a second tunnel they had missed. 3 months after the invasion began, Admiral Ravax was summoned to Vela Prime. The High Crown received him inside the Hall of Measured Worlds, where holographic spheres of conquered planets drifted beneath a ceiling painted with the Dominion's first sunrise. Earth's sphere hung apart from the others, blue-white and stubborn, surrounded by red annotations. High Sovereign Marith sat upon the crescent throne, her silver crest lowered in displeasure. "Admiral," she said, "you were assigned a primitive world." "Yes, Sovereign." "You were given overwhelming force." "Yes." "You achieved orbital dominance in 1 day." "Yes." "You seized every listed strategic target within 17 days." "Yes." "And yet production quotas remain 0. Labor compliance remains negligible. Resource extraction has not begun. Our forces hold cities full of furniture and no citizens. Explain this contradiction." Ravax stood beneath the floating image of Earth and felt every commander in the hall watching him. "The humans do not defend territory as expected," he said. "They defend continuity. They abandon what we attack and preserve what we ignore. When we adjust, they adjust faster." A governor hissed from the council tier. "Excuses." Ravax turned toward the sphere. Show Occupation Report 87. The hall darkened. Footage appeared from a Dominion patrol entering an underground agricultural facility beneath what had once been a shopping complex. The facility's heat signature had suggested thousands of civilians. Troops breached the doors and found rows upon rows of growing vegetables under ultraviolet lamps. No people, only speakers. A human recording began playing. If you are hearing this, congratulations, you found the lettuce. The council chamber shifted with uncomfortable murmurs. The footage accelerated. Dominion soldiers swept the facility. No defenders, no traps. Then the plants began releasing pollen, not toxic, but adhesive, clinging to armor and marking every soldier with a chemical scent detectable by human rescue dogs and cheap drones for weeks. That patrol became impossible to use in stealth operations. The next recording showed a Dominion supply depot in occupied Europe. It had not been bombed. It had not been raided. Every vehicle simply failed to start at once because human mechanics, captured and forced to repair them, had installed parts that worked perfectly until exposed to a specific emergency broadcast frequency. The next showed a prison compound for captured civilians. The Dominion had organized it efficiently by age and labor category. The humans reorganized it overnight into schools, clinics, kitchens, councils, sanitation crews, theater groups, legal committees, and escape teams. Within 6 days, the camp functioned better under prisoner administration than Dominion oversight. On the 7th day, half the prisoners escaped through a drainage system the Dominion had documented but considered too narrow for adults. It was not too narrow for children carrying disassembled tools. The children returned the next night to widen it for the adults. Ravax watched the council absorb the recordings. Then he showed them the battlefield at Tycho Deep, a lunar industrial complex. Dominion forces had attacked to seize helium reserves and manufacturing capacity. Human defenders withdrew early, leaving behind automated factories. The Dominion celebrated the capture. 12 hours later, the factories began producing parts, not weapons. Wrong-sized bolts, slightly warped coolant rings, ceramic washers with microscopic imperfections, components that looked correct, passed basic scans, and failed only after installation inside Dominion equipment. The complex had become a machine for manufacturing inconvenience, not destruction, inconvenience. Across an interstellar occupation force, inconvenience multiplied into paralysis. A minister of conquest stood sharply. Enough, these are annoyances. You are making a mythology out of vermin. Ravax's crest flared before he could stop it. Vermin do not build evacuation networks under orbital fire. Vermin do not corrupt supply chains with children's chemistry sets. Vermin do not lose every formal battle and still expand operational capacity. The hall went silent. The High Sovereign leaned forward. Choose your next words carefully, Admiral. Ravax lowered his crest. We are winning the visible war and losing the hidden one. No one moved. He continued because stopping now would be cowardice. Every strike teaches them. Every occupation gives them material. Every prisoner becomes a coordinator. Every destroyed system returns in smaller pieces. We depend on central supply, central command, central doctrine. They do not. They fragment without collapsing. They suffer without becoming predictable. We kill leaders and reveal replacements. We destroy infrastructure and activate older infrastructure beneath it. We frighten them, and fear makes them faster. The High Sovereign's voice was soft. Your recommendation? Ravax felt the weight of centuries behind him. Negotiate! The hall erupted. Ministers shouted. Commanders clicked in outrage. Governors demanded his removal. One old fleet lord called the suggestion treason. The High Sovereign raised one hand. Silence returned slowly. We do not negotiate with worlds under active correction, she said. Then we must change the correction, Ravax replied, or destroy the world outright. The words landed harder than he expected. Destroying Earth would be easy. Too easy, but it would waste everything the Dominion came to claim. Worse, it would prove the primitive species had forced the Dominion to abandon purpose for rage. That was not conquest. That was failure wearing armor. The High Sovereign dismissed the council but ordered Ravax to remain. When the hall emptied, she descended from the throne and stood beside Earth's sphere. "You fear them," she said. "Yes. Because they can defeat us?" "No," Ravax said. "Because they can survive us. There is a difference." She studied the rotating planet. "Our analysts intercepted a new human term. Ashline. What is it?" Ravax had hoped she would not ask. "We do not know completely. It appears to be a final contingency." "A weapon?" "Possibly. Find out." "I have tried." "Try harder." Ravax returned to the front with new orders. "Continue occupation. Increase pressure. Locate Ashline. Prepare escalation options." The humans made sure he found the answer. Not immediately. They let him chase rumors first. Ashline was a place beneath the Pacific. Ashline was a fleet beyond Pluto. Ashline was a biological archive. Ashline was a dead man's switch connected to every fusion reactor on Earth. Ashline was a code phrase for surrender. Ashline was a prayer. The Dominion captured documents, interrogated prisoners, decrypted partial transmissions, and followed false trails through abandoned bunkers. Every answer contradicted another. Every captured human seemed to know exactly enough to be dangerous and not enough to be useful. Then, on the 97th day of occupation, a Dominion cruiser pursuing a human convoy near the asteroid belt detected a dormant structure embedded inside a hollowed nickel-iron body. The asteroid was too small for a base, too cold for a habitat, too quiet for importance. The cruiser cracked it open. Inside were 10,000 sleeping humans, children mostly, and not just humans, dogs, cats, bees, frozen embryos, seed vaults, coral tanks, soil samples, bird eggs, microbial cultures, art collections, medical libraries, water reclamation units, machine tools, fabricators, teachers in cryosleep, surgeons, engineers, storytellers, linguists, musicians. The asteroid was an ark, not a military ark, a civilization ark. Before the cruiser could secure it, the ark woke. Its engines, hidden beneath layers of stone, burned white. The entire asteroid shifted course with impossible violence, shedding its outer shell. Decoy fragments scattered in every direction, each broadcasting identical life signs. Human stealth tugs emerged from shadow and latched onto the core vessel, dragging it toward deep space. The Dominion cruiser fired. 3 human tugs placed themselves in the beam path. They were vaporized instantly. The ark escaped. Ravax watched the recording 3 times. Then the message arrived from Earth. "Admiral Then, now you know what Ashline is. It is not one place. It is not one fleet. It is not one weapon. It is the line beyond which humanity continues without Earth. Every ark you find means thousands more you do not. Every child you threaten moves the line farther away. We are not trapped on our homeworld with you. You are trapped in a war against a species that has already planned how to outlive losing." Attached was a list, not of demands, of names. The names of the human crews who had died blocking the cruiser's shot. Beside each name was a small personal detail. Loved mangoes. Could repair anything. Afraid of heights but became a pilot anyway. Sang badly. Promised his daughter the stars. Ravax closed the file. For the first time in his command career, he understood that the humans were not merely resisting conquest. They were making conquest irrelevant. If Earth fell, humanity would continue. If the ark scattered, humanity would become impossible to gather again. If the Dominion chased them, it would spend centuries hunting seeds through darkness, while the occupied planet below remained unproductive, resentful, and endlessly inventive. Ashline changed the war, but not enough for the High Crown. The sovereign's reply was immediate. If the species intends to scatter, prevent scattering. Deploy the sunhook. Ravax read the order alone. Then he read it again, hoping the words would change. They did not. The sunhook was not a standard weapon. It was an ancient siege device, rarely used because it was too powerful to preserve what it struck. It anchored to a star's magnetic field, drew out a controlled filament of stellar plasma, and shaped it into a lance capable of sweeping orbital space clean. Used carefully, it could destroy every arc launch corridor, every high-orbit platform, every hidden fleet path, every shelter exit requiring surface access. Used carelessly, it could wound Earth's magnetosphere and begin a cascade that would poison the world the Dominion wanted to own. High Command called it decisive pressure. Ravax called it desperation. The humans called it murder before it fired. They knew within 6 hours. Somehow, despite Dominion encryption, despite silent orders, despite courier drones and sealed command paths, the Lantern Corps learned the sunhook was coming. Earth did not panic. That frightened Ravax more than panic would have. Instead, the planet went into lantern silence. All major human transmissions ceased. No chatter, no defiant speeches, no songs, no messages from shelters, no false commands, no mocking signals, no old radios bouncing hope through static. Silence. For 2 days, Earth became a dark planet beneath Dominion occupation. Valon troops advanced nervously through empty streets and abandoned command posts. They found candles burning in windows, but no people. They found food left warming in pots, but no cooks. They found classrooms underground with lessons still written on boards. One phrase appeared everywhere: hold the rope. On the 3rd day, the sunhook arrived. It was larger than any ship humanity had seen. Not a vessel, but a ring of black spines surrounding a molten core, towed by 12 Dominion dreadnoughts and escorted by 100 warships. It took position above the solar plane, angled toward the sun like a predator, lowering its mouth to water. The Dominion fleet formed a protective shell. Ravax stood on the bridge of the Conquest of Dawn and watched the deployment with dread he could not show. His tactical minister approached. Once the sunhook fires, their orbital capacity ends. And if Earth's field destabilizes? Acceptable risk under Crown order. Nothing is acceptable if the prize dies in our hand. The minister said nothing. Then the humans broke silence. A single transmission reached every Dominion ship. It was not Admiral Reyes. She was dead. It was not Coordinator Hadi. He had vanished after the Andes bunker strike. It was Amara Okonkwo, the engineer who had asked humanity what it was trying to save. Her face appeared on every screen, older than in the first intercepted recordings, exhausted, lit by emergency lamps. Behind her stood people in hard hats, flight suits, medical scrubs, pressure gear, farm coats, military uniforms, and children too young to hide their fear. "Valen Dominion," she said. "You are about to fire a stellar weapon into civilian orbital space. If you proceed, we will respond." Ravax opened the channel before command protocol could stop him. "With what?" he asked. Amara looked at him. "Everything we moved while you were looking at the cities." The transmission ended. The tactical minister snapped. "Bluff!" Ravax whispered. "No." The space around Earth began to shine. At first it looked like debris catching sunlight. Then the debris moved. Thousands of objects awakened across the system. The old satellites the Dominion had ignored because they carried no weapons. The arc decoys drifting dead beyond Mars. The fuel tanks abandoned after the first orbital battle. The mirror farms from lunar agriculture. The solar sail prototypes from universities. The weather control reflectors. The failed asteroid mining nets. The telescope shades. The museum habitats. The wreckage of the destroyed human fleet. Every useless thing humanity had left in space turned, unfolded, linked, and began reflecting sunlight. Not toward Dominion ships, toward other mirrors. The light passed from mirror to mirror, sail to sail, shard to shard, dust cloud to dust cloud, forming lines of brilliance across millions of kilometers. It became a web, then a lens, then something larger, a human structure built from wreckage, farming tools, dead ships, scientific instruments, and things the Dominion had not considered worth destroying. The sunhook began charging. The human light web adjusted. Dominion targeting systems struggled to classify it. Weapon, shield, signal, art? Ravax already knew. It was a rope made of light. The sunhook fired. A filament of starfire rose from the sun, drawn thin and terrible through the black ring. The lance arced toward Earth's orbital plane, bright enough to blind sensors through filters. The human web caught it, not stopped it. Nothing could stop that much power, but it bent it. Millions of reflective surfaces vaporized in sequence, each dying surface transferring momentum, heat, and angle. Automated tugs burned out their engines, holding mirror clusters for fractions of seconds. Human crews aboard the largest arrays remained at manual controls because no machine could adjust fast enough through the interference. They knew they would not survive. Their voices returned over open channels. Not screams, reports. Mirror Farm Kenya holding. Lunar Sail 3 overheating. Children's Ark 7 confirms trajectory clear. Rotterdam Tug Group, burn complete. This is Agricultural Reflector Bellwether. We are lined up. Tell my wife complete. This is Agricultural. I saw the sunrise twice. One by one, the voices vanished. The filament bent farther. The sunhook's control ring shuddered. Dominion engineers shouted warnings. The weapon had not been designed to fight a mirror made of civilization's leftovers. It compensated. The humans compensated faster. Volunteers on Earth calculated angles by hand when computers failed. A classroom in a bunker beneath Kyoto solved a thermal equation that saved 3 arc corridors. A retired lighthouse keeper in Scotland identified a timing pulse by eye and corrected a mirror sequence with a ham radio key. A girl in Nairobi noticed a gap in the web because it looked wrong compared to the bead patterns her grandmother had taught her, and her warning redirected 9 drones before the starfire tore through. The Dominion fleet watched a species think with its whole body. Then the human counterstroke began. The bent filament did not strike Earth. It swept back across the sunhook's own escort formation. Ravax saw it coming before anyone else. Move the fleet. Too late. The starfire carved through the outer Dominion shell. Shields flared and collapsed. Dreadnoughts split open like paper lanterns. The sunhook's towing ships tried to release, but human dust from the first battle, still clinging in shield seams and control vanes, activated under the radiation burst and jammed half their disconnect systems. The weapon that was meant to end human resistance became a burning chain around the Dominion's throat. Sunhook core unstable. Escort line collapsing. Dreadnought Vel Meyer is gone. Civilian Ark signatures escaping beyond Mars. Ravax gripped the command rail. Cut power to the sunhook. Crown authorization required. Cut it. The officer hesitated. Ravax drew his sidearm and aimed it at the command lock. The bridge froze. I will not let pride kill a world, he said. The tactical minister stepped forward. That is treason. Ravax fired, not at the minister, at the command lock. The station exploded in sparks. The authorization circuit died. Manual override engaged. Cut power, Ravax repeated. This time, the officer obeyed. The sunhook collapsed inward. For 3 seconds, there was no sound on the bridge except alarms. Then the weapon tore itself apart. The explosion consumed 12 Dominion ships, scattered the escort shell, and sent a wave of electromagnetic fury across near-Earth space. Human mirrors died by the thousands. Dominion sensors went blind. The conquest of Dawn spun under impact stress. Emergency shutters slammed down across the viewports. When the bridge stabilized, half the tactical display was dark. Earth remained, scarred, burning in places, surrounded by debris and aurora storms, but alive, and from beyond Mars, beyond Jupiter, beyond the outer dark, thousands of faint drives appeared, arcs, not fleeing now, revealing themselves. Their lights filled the system like stars deciding to move. The Dominion had not trapped humanity. It had surrounded a nest after the birds had learned fire. A new transmission arrived, audio only. Amara Okonkwo's voice was weaker now. Admiral Then, your weapon is dead. Your fleet is damaged. Our arcs are clear. We can continue. The question is whether you can. Ravax closed his eyes. Around him, officers waited for orders. The tactical minister, wounded but alive, hissed, "We still have enough ships to strike the surface." "Yes," Ravax said. "We can force surrender." "No," Ravax said. "We can punish them." Ravax opened his eyes. "And after punishment? What then?" "We rule ashes, chase arcs, and teach every species in the spiral that the Dominion can be made afraid enough to waste what it wants." The minister's crest flattened. "You would surrender?" Ravax looked at Earth. "No, I would stop losing." He opened a channel to the High Crown. The signal took minutes to route through damaged relays. When High Sovereign Marith appeared, the throne chamber behind her was already alive with alarms. She knew enough. Not all, but enough. "Report," she said. The sunhook failed. Her gaze hardened. "Explain." The humans turned it. "Impossible." "They did it." The Sovereign stood very still. Ravax continued, "Our losses are severe. The human arc network is active and dispersed. Earth remains unconquered. Continued operations will require either planetary sterilization or indefinite occupation without productive return. I recommend immediate cessation and negotiation." "You recommend this again after disobeying Crown Weapons Protocol?" "Yes." "You understand the penalty?" "Yes." The Sovereign's voice dropped. "Give me one reason not to strip your name from the war rolls." Ravax looked at the damaged bridge, the wounded officers, the screens showing Earth still blue beneath storms of light. "Because I am the only commander here who has learned the enemy." The Sovereign said nothing. Ravax leaned closer. "They are not strong because they do not break. They break constantly. That is what we fail to understand. They break, and every broken piece becomes a tool. They lose ships and make mirrors. They lose cities and make tunnels. They lose commanders and make committees. They lose Earth and become arcs. If we continue, they will lose mercy next. I do not want to see what they make from that." For a long time, the High Sovereign was silent. Then she ended the transmission. Ravax did not know whether he had saved his fleet or condemned himself. The answer came 7 hours later. All Dominion forces were ordered to cease offensive action and withdraw to holding distance beyond lunar orbit. Human forces were to do the same where possible. Negotiation envoys would be exchanged under neutral observation from the Talon Drift, a wandering civilization whose ships had watched the war from a distance and refused to join either side. The Dominion did not call it surrender. Humanity did not call it victory. Not yet. The first meeting took place aboard a Talon vessel shaped like a silver seed. Its halls were grown from translucent crystal, and its atmosphere smelled faintly of rain on stone. Ravax arrived with 3 officers, 2 guards, and the knowledge that half the Dominion wanted his execution. Amara Okonkwo arrived in a pressure chair because her bunker had partially collapsed during the Sunhook battle, and her spine had not yet recovered. Beside her stood a young naval officer named Priya Nadir, a lunar farmer named Elias Cho, whose mirror array had survived longer than anyone expected, and a 12-year-old girl named Seifu Mensa. Ravax recognized the girl from a battle report. She had identified the mirror gap. He found himself unable to look at her for long. The Talon mediator opened the session with ceremonial neutrality. Amara skipped ceremony. "You will leave Earth orbit," she said. Ravax inclined his head. "Yes." "You will return all prisoners." "Yes." You will provide medical support for the regions contaminated by your strikes. That will be contested by the Crown. Then contest harder." Ravax almost admired her tone. Priya Nadir placed a data slate on the table. "These are the minimum terms: withdrawal from Sul, recognition of human sovereignty, non-interference with ARC vessels, reparative technology transfers limited to environmental stabilization, medicine, and debris clearance. No military tech." Ravax's officer clicked in surprise. "You do not demand weapons?" Amara looked at him. "We have enough imagination. We need clean water." The officer had no answer. Ravax studied the terms. They were harsh, but not humiliating. The humans were not demanding Dominion colonies, tribute, or public submission. They wanted survival repaired, boundaries recognized, prisoners returned, and the dead named. The dead named. That clause was the longest. Every human killed in confirmed Dominion action would be recorded in a shared memorial archive. Every Dominion soldier killed in Sol would also be recorded, if the Dominion provided names. Ravax looked up. "Why include our dead?" Seifu, the child, answered before anyone else. "Because they were here." Her voice was small, but it carried. Ravax felt the room change. The Dominion officer beside him lowered his crest, not in submission, but in something close to shame. The negotiations lasted 11 days. 3 times, the Dominion nearly walked away. Twice, human hardliners demanded renewed strikes against the damaged fleet. Once, a Valen governor tried to conceal a prisoner transport ship, and the Lantern Corps exposed it by tracing laundry water chemicals through orbital waste vents. The humans noticed everything. On the 12th day, the treaty was signed. Ravax signed for the Dominion because the High Crown would not send anyone more important to be photographed beside humans. Amara signed for Earth because every government had learned that when she asked what they were trying to save, people listened. After the signing, Ravax expected celebration. There was none. Human ships blinked acknowledgement lights across the debris field. Earth shelters played bells, songs, prayers, and long lists of names. People emerged from tunnels into sunlight and wept, not because the war was glorious, but because the sky was still there. Dominion ships withdrew past the moon. As the conquest of dawn turned away from Earth, a final human message arrived. It contained no threat, no insult, no demand, only the repaired scout probe's original lullaby now translated. "Sleep, little flame, the dark is wide. Hands will hold you through the night." Ravax listened to it once. Then he ordered it saved in the ship's permanent archive. When he returned to Vela Prime, he was arrested before his feet touched the landing platform. The trial lasted 9 days. The charges were disobedience, unauthorized weapons override, strategic failure, dishonor before a primitive enemy, and misuse of Crown trust. The prosecution played recordings of his order to cut power to the Sunhook. They displayed casualty figures. They showed images of burning Dominion ships reflected in human mirrors. Ravax did not deny any of it. When asked for his defense, he stood in the center of the tribunal chamber and spoke only one sentence. "I preserved the Dominion from a war it could only continue by becoming less than itself." That sentence spread faster than the High Crown expected. Not among the proud fleets at first. Among the families of soldiers who had returned from Earth changed. Among engineers who had read the occupation reports and understood the cost. Among governors who quietly calculated how many colonies would rebel if they learned the Dominion could bleed indefinitely on one blue world. Among young officers who watched the Sunhook footage and realized the humans had aimed the reflected starfire away from Vela Prime's civilian relay ship, even though destroying it would have crippled Dominion communications. Humanity had been capable of cruelty, but at the final moment it had chosen precision. That disturbed the Dominion more deeply than savagery would have. Savages could be dismissed. A species that could bend a star weapon and still choose what not to hit had to be understood. Ravax was convicted, but he was not executed. The High Sovereign stripped him of active command and exiled him to a quiet orbital academy where old officers taught theory to cadets too young to have smelled battle. His first lecture had 12 students. By the end of the year, the hall overflowed. The course title was officially Adaptive Resistance in Fragmented Civilizations. The cadets called it Human War. Ravax began every term with the same question. What are you trying to save? Most cadets answered incorrectly. Power, territory, victory, honor. Ravax would wait until they finished, then play the recording of Tomas Ilyin in the interrogation room. A candle, a voice, a hand on a rope. Then he would say, "Until you know what your enemy is saving, you do not know what war you are in." On Earth, peace did not arrive cleanly. Nothing about survival was clean. Cities had to be rebuilt around craters. Orbital debris had to be cleared before it fell. Refuge shelters became permanent neighborhoods. Children who had grown up underground cried the first time they saw open sky because it was too large. Farmers returned to fields seeded with metal fragments. Families searched lists. Governments argued over who had failed whom. Soldiers and civilians fought over credit, blame, grief, and memory. The Lantern Corps refused to disband. No one quite knew what to do with it. It was too useful to dissolve and too decentralized to control. Its members had kept humanity alive through invasion. They had also built unauthorized tunnels, hidden arcs from their own governments, hacked military networks, ignored surrender protocols, and turned civilian infrastructure into planetary resistance without waiting for permission. Some politicians called them heroes, others called them dangerous. Amara Okonkwo settled the matter during the first global hearing after the war. A senator asked her whether the Lantern Corps would submit to permanent government oversight. Amara looked at him from her pressure chair and said, "We submit to the next disaster. You are welcome to help." The hearing ended without a vote. The arcs became a new argument. Some returned. Some stayed hidden. Some pushed farther into interstellar dark, carrying seeds of humanity beyond every map. The children aboard them learned Earth history as both home and warning. They learned the Dominion language alongside mathematics. They learned how to repair air recyclers before they learned poetry, though poetry survived anyway, because teachers insisted survival without beauty was just a longer emergency. Sefu Mensah grew up aboard Arc 17 for 6 more years before returning to Earth. She hated speeches. People kept asking how it felt to save the planet by noticing a gap in a mirror web. She always answered, "I was one person in a very large room." Then she became an engineer. Tomas Ilyin died 2 years after the treaty from complications related to his injuries. His funeral was small because he had requested it. The bridge department of his old city named a pedestrian crossing after him. Children left candles there every year. Admiral Leona Reyes's command ship was never recovered. Its debris had burned in atmosphere during the Sunhook storm. The child's drawing taped above her navigation display survived because someone had removed it before the final battle for scanning into the memory rain. The drawing showed Earth as a blue circle, the moon as a smiling face, and many small lights around them. In one corner, a child had written, "Don't let the dark eat us." It became one of the most copied images in human space. 10 years passed. Trade began cautiously. At first, it was practical. Medical stabilizers from the Dominion in exchange for human redundancy algorithms. Shield harmonics for crop resilience models. Debris clearing drones for disaster training simulations. The Dominion wanted to understand how humans improvised under pressure. Humans wanted to understand how Dominion materials survived energy loads. Neither side trusted the other, but engineers are dangerous diplomats because they care more about whether things work than whether hatred is traditional. A Valen structural theorist visited a rebuilt human coastal city and spent 3 days arguing with a retired ship mechanic about flexible load distribution. They left as co-authors of a paper that revolutionized orbital habitat design. Human doctors studied Dominion nerve regeneration and adapted it for spinal injuries. Amara walked again for the first time 12 years after the war, using a brace built from Valan bioframe tech and human stubbornness. Dominion cadets came to Earth under guard and toured shelters preserved as memorials. They expected museums of victory. Instead, they found rooms full of bunk beds, water filters, hand-drawn maps, patched radios, and walls covered in names. One cadet asked why humans preserved the smell of the shelters. The guide answered, because memory should not be too comfortable. 15 years after the treaty, the next threat arrived from the dark between spiral arms. It did not send an ultimatum. It did not demand surrender. It did not occupy cities. The first sign was a mining colony going silent near the outer Dominion rim, then a relay station, then 3 human Ark scouts beyond the old ashline routes. Rescue ships found hulls intact, reactors running, meals half-eaten, and every living mind aboard emptied of response. The Talon called it the Hollow Bloom, a drifting intelligence, perhaps natural, perhaps engineered by some dead civilization, spreading through signal networks and nervous systems alike. It did not kill bodies. It erased initiative. Worlds touched by it continued functioning for a while. Lights on, machines running, populations breathing, but nobody chose anything new. No art, no repairs beyond routine, no children named, no questions asked. For the Dominion, it was horror. For humanity, it was a nightmare wearing silence. The High Crown sent fleets. They failed. Human Ark scouts tried to outrun it. Some did not. The Bloom adapted to centralized command faster than the Dominion could isolate it. It absorbed automated defense protocols. It turned predictive systems into traps. It followed clean chains of authority like fire along oil. Then an old Valan instructor on an orbital academy opened a channel to Earth. Ravax then was older now. His crest had dulled. His hands trembled slightly when tired, but his voice remained steady. "You understand fragmented survival," he said. "We understand shielded containment. Separately, we are losing. Together, we may become inconvenient enough to live." Amara Okonkwo, now head of the International Continuity Office despite never once winning an election, answered from Earth. "That is the most respectful thing your people have ever said to mine. I have had time to learn. So have we." The joint operation that followed had no precedent. Dominion ships formed shield shells around human lantern fleets. Human operators refused unified command, spreading decisions across thousands of independent cells, so the Bloom could not follow a single mind chain. Valan mathematicians built containment geometries. Human musicians designed signal noise based on improvisational jazz, whale song, emergency code pulses, lullabies, and the irregular breathing patterns of sleeping children, because the Bloom predicted logic more easily than life. The battle was fought not with explosions at first, but with choices. Every time the Hollow Bloom pushed a command suggestion into the fleet, human cells answered differently. Some obeyed halfway, some inverted it. Some asked children in sealed classrooms to choose between colored lights at random. Some used dice. Some used poetry prompts. Some used old disaster drills. Some used jokes the Dominion translation matrix could not parse. The Bloom hesitated. The Dominion shields closed. At the center of the operation, aboard the rebuilt Conquest of Dawn, Ravak stood beside Sefu Mensa, now Chief Systems Architect for the Lantern Expedition. She was no longer the frightened child from the treaty table. She wore a grease-stained jacket over a formal uniform and had 3 styluses tucked behind one ear. "The containment lattice is too clean," she said. Ravax turned. "Clean is desirable. Not against this, it likes clean. What do you recommend?" She looked at the display, then at the old Admiral. "We make it ugly." Ravax almost smiled. "Define ugly." Sefu opened a fleet-wide channel. All lantern cells, all Dominion shield crews unsynchronize on my mark. Local judgment, no formation purity, no perfect intervals. Sing if you have to, argue if you have to, just do not match. A Dominion captain protested immediately. Unsynchronized shields will reduce efficiency by 30%. Sifu answered, Great, it will hate that. Ravax gave the order before anyone could overrule her. Across the fleet, Dominion shield harmonics broke from perfect geometry into human-guided imperfection. The lattice wobbled, flexed, stuttered, became less beautiful and more alive. The hollow bloom surged toward the flaw and got stuck in 10,000 flaws at once. Human lantern ships moved like emergency crews in a collapsing building, never elegant, always exactly where another hand was needed. Dominion vessels held impossible pressure lines with engineering precision no human ship could match. Together, order and improvisation became something neither species had managed alone. The bloom tried to escape through a captured relay. A human arc placed itself in the path, shields failing. Ravax saw it. That arc carries civilians. Sifu's hands flew over controls. Not for long. The Ark's civilian compartments detached in lifeboat clusters, each caught by Dominion tractor webs. The empty Ark core accelerated into the relay and detonated, severing the bloom's path. Ravax watched Dominion ships rescue human lifeboats without waiting for orders. He watched human drones patch Dominion shield emitters mid-battle. He watched a Valen cadet and a human teenager scream calculations at each other across an open channel, both convinced the other was wrong, both combining into the correct answer. The hollow bloom collapsed under the weight of unpredictable cooperation. When containment sealed, the silence it left behind felt like dawn after a long winter. The joint fleet did not cheer at first. Then one human ship began transmitting the old lullaby. A Dominion vessel answered with a Valon morning chord. The sounds did not match. Then slowly, imperfectly, they did. After the hollow bloom, no one could pretend the old war still defined everything. The Dominion and Earth signed the Second Lantern Accord, mutual defense, disaster exchange, arc protection, limits on stellar weapons, shared memorial obligations, joint command protocols designed with deliberate redundancy, and protected descent channels, because the official report concluded that civilization-level survival required both discipline and argument. Ravax attended the signing in a wheelchair. So did Amara. They sat side by side, two old enemies who had spent too much of their lives preventing worse futures. You realize, Amara said quietly, that if your people had opened with diplomacy, we could have saved everyone a great deal of trouble. Ravax looked at the treaty hall filled with humans, Valen, Talon, and representatives from worlds that once feared the Dominion too much to speak freely. If we had opened with diplomacy, he said, we might never have learned why it mattered. Amara considered that. That is a very expensive lesson. Yes. Try cheaper ones next time. I teach that now. Years later, near the end of his life, Ravax visited Earth. He expected ceremony. There was some, because governments cannot resist ceremony. But his private request was granted. He was taken not to a capital, not to a rebuilt command center, not to the glittering orbital mirrors now maintained as both defense and memorial. He was taken to an old pedestrian bridge, Tomas Ilian's Bridge. It crossed a river that had flooded decades before the invasion. Children walked across it on their way to school. Cyclists rang bells. Vendors sold roasted nuts nearby. A small plaque bore Tomas's name and a line from his interrogation, a hand on a rope. Ravax stood there for a long time. Sefu Mensa, who had accompanied him as official liaison, waited without rushing him. Finally, he said, we came to take your world because we believed survival belonged to the strong. Sifu leaned on the railing beside him. And now? Ravax watched the river move beneath the bridge, carrying sunlight in broken pieces that joined and separated and joined again. Now I think survival belongs to those who keep reaching. That evening, he visited the orbital memorial above Earth. It was built from fragments of the first battle. Dominion armor, human mirror shards, melted railgun slugs, pieces of the Sunhook's black ring, and one polished plate from the repaired scout probe that had started everything. The memorial did not show soldiers triumphing. It showed hands, human hands, valen claws, talon tendrils, small hands of children, mechanical hands from rescue drones, all linked in a circle around a tiny white flame. Names covered the walls, human names, Veylan names, names from the Hollow Bloom colonies, names from arcs that never returned, names still being added because history never stops asking its price. At the center, beneath the white flame, were words in every language of the Accord. When the dark came, we held the rope. Ravax placed one trembling hand against the wall. For most of his life, he had believed conquest was proof of greatness. He had believed order was stronger than fear, discipline stronger than desperation, technology stronger than primitive stubbornness. Then he met a species that hid its children in asteroids, turned wreckage into mirrors, answered invasion with evacuation maps, and bent a weaponized piece of the sun with the leftovers of its own broken fleet. Humanity had not been fearless. That was the part the legends always got wrong. They had been terrified. Terrified parents, terrified engineers, terrified doctors, terrified children in tunnels learning not to cry when the ceiling shook. Terrified pilots holding mirror arrays in place while starfire came for them. Terrified leaders making impossible decisions with incomplete maps and too many names. But they had moved anyway. They had reached anyway. They had saved what they could, then saved more, then built new hands from whatever remained. That was the thing the Dominion had mistaken for weakness. Humans broke. They broke loudly, messily, painfully, again and again. Then they passed the pieces to one another and said, "Build." Ravax died 3 months after returning to Vela Prime. At his request, no statue was raised. Instead, his academy added one requirement to the first day of every command course. Cadets were given a disaster scenario with no winning outcome: a city flooding, a fleet cut off, a colony starving, a world under invasion. They were told not to defeat the disaster because some disasters could not be defeated. They were told to answer one question: what are you trying to save? Most still answered incorrectly at first. That was expected. Learning began after pride failed. On Earth, children grew up seeing Veylan ships in the sky and asking whether they were enemies. Their grandparents sometimes took a long time to answer. No, they would say eventually. Not anymore. Then, if the child was old enough, they told the story. Not the clean version, not the parade version, the real one. About the probe that came back singing, about the 40 days, about the Lantern Corps, about the cities that emptied and the tunnels that filled, about Admiral Reyes and the ships made of scrap, about Thomas and the door he opened, about Amara asking the question nobody could escape, about Sifu seeing the missing light, about the mirror web catching the sun, about an enemy admiral who chose to stop, about arcs hidden in stone, about how victory was not that humanity beat the Dominion in the way the Dominion understood. Victory was that when the Dominion arrived to claim humanity's future, they found humanity had already packed it, hidden it, taught it to repair air filters, given it songs, and sent it beyond the reach of fear. And when the children asked what the lesson was, the elders did not say humans were strongest. They did not say humans were chosen. They did not say humans were good at war, though the galaxy had learned never to doubt it. They said something older, harder, and more useful. When the dark gets wide, find a hand. If you cannot find one, become one. And if the rope breaks, tie another from whatever is left. Chuang Ti Ding Duan.